The Cooler Master H500P case features two huge and distinctive 200mm RGB fans up front, a tinted tempered glass side panel window, and a vertical GPU mount. With room for 360 rads on the top and front, a tasteful PSU shroud, and helpful cable management covers in the back, the H500P will make your next build both easy and sexy, just like me. Click the link in the description for more.
Excellent!
Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to Paul's Hardware. This is my monthly builds video. It is November, as you can maybe tell, and today's monthly builds video is going to be a little bit different than my usual monthly builds video. For one main thing, I've actually already built my monthly build for this month. It's right here. It is about a $1,700-ish all AMD build in the new NZXT H400i, and I just posted that video yesterday, so check it out, as well as checking out my builds playlist where you can find all of the builds I've done. As for today, I'm going to be going over some parts lists, so a quick glance at the parts list for this build, and then I have two other parts lists that I have put together based on your feedback from last month. So the question was what builds you want to see this month. The answer by about 30% of you was the best gaming PC for $800. Now what I've done is I've made two gaming PCs that are $650 and about $1,150, and I'm going to talk more theoretically about choosing the parts that go into a build, the general price expectations that you should have, and especially since it's about a week until Black Friday right now, how you should sort of go about your thought process when you're choosing parts to put into a new system that you're building right now, and also sort of a challenge, because I'm going to show you guys the prices I'm looking at, and I have just last night and this morning put together builds that I think are kind of the best bang for your buck at different price points. And let me know if you guys over the next week or so can find some screaming deals with the Black Friday stuff going on, and perhaps get these builds or equivalent of these builds for much less money. I think that's very, very possible. So, of course, we're going to start off with that NZXT H100i build, and then we have the $1,150 price point, and then we also have the $650 price point, and these are actually tied very closely together. So first off, the H400i build, and this is already assembled. I'm going to be testing this. This will run you about $1,700-ish, depending on how you buy stuff and where you buy it. It's got an R7 1700 CPU in it, which is an 8-core 16-thread processor. You can get for less than $300, $285 on Amazon right now. The Rev 2 of the NZXT Kraken X62, which is a 280mm all-in-one liquid cooler. The Rev 2 version does have support for the AM4 socket, so you get a bracket in there that is compatible, and that was definitely nice to have. Motherboard was only $75, and this is probably, if anything, the weak point in the build. Not that it's a bad motherboard or anything, it's got a very nice set of features, but it's only a $75 motherboard, so when you're looking at an upgrade path, you're probably not going to have the greatest of power delivery on this motherboard, although you do have two M.2 slots, which is part of the reason why I chose it, as well as 4 DIMM slots for DDR4. Two M.2 slots was actually really hard to find down in the budget B350 range, but ASRock has several motherboards that have that, which I thought was nice. Now, memory is a big challenge right now because it is very overpriced, and I ended up going with the Corsair Dominator Platinum kit for this build, and that was because the memory that I had on hand actually wasn't working. It wasn't compatible immediately upon installation. So definitely a recommendation to double check the QVL lists, the memory lists that motherboard manufacturers put out to double check that the memory that you're purchasing will be compatible with the motherboard and processor that you choose. You can also check AMD's lists for that as well, because they have some lists available on their website. So I went to Corsair Dominator Platinum. There are cheaper 16 gig kits out there, but this one looks pretty nice, and I had it, so there we go. Toshiba has a new series of SSDs. They're budget oriented. They're called the TR200. So I had a 480 gig version of that they sent over, so I dropped that in there. Available in 240, 480, and 960 gig capacities, and the 240, at least right now, is going to run you about $90, and I haven't found a price for the 480, but it should be roughly twice that. Moving over to the big ticket item, and the reason why I chose to do an all AMD build was because Vega 56 was actually selling for kind of close to the retail price. So I actually set up a parametric filter, which you can use on PC Part Picker to just choose, for instance, a specific type of GPU and see what's available and tell it to just choose the lowest price version. Gigabyte has one for $465 right now. Guys, last week you could find a Vega 56 for $400, if not $400, $420, which is still $20 more than the MSRP. I do not recommend buying a Vega 56 at $460, $470. At $400 to $420, there's an argument to be made that it is powerful enough to be competitive with the GTX 1070, and even more so if you are planning to buy a FreeSync monitor at the same time, because those pair well together. But when you're looking at these expensive prices due to cryptocurrency mining, it just doesn't, it's not practical to buy that for gaming. So for that reason, the builds we're going to talk about next, I've mainly chosen NVIDIA cards because the AMD cards just can't seem to keep their prices down. Moving on though, the NZXT H400i, new case from NZXT. It's a micro ATX case, and that's actually why I had a little bit of a difficult time finding a proper motherboard for this case, but it's $150. Definitely premium. A high-end case, but it does have a very nice set of features, and definitely check out that video if you want to see me assembling all this stuff in there. Cooler Master 650 watt 80 plus gold power supply, about $95, and then 3 NZXT Air RGB fans, an NZXT Hue Plus LED controller, and an NZXT internal USB hub, rounding things out so I was able to plug in all the fans and use the NZXT Cam software to control my lighting and make it kind of fancy and do the marquee effects and stuff. So we'll be following up with a test video on this system, do some more lighting effects, and of course see how the performance is, since it is the first all AMD system I've built in quite some time. Let's move on to our next builds, and these should hopefully be a little bit more practical and a little bit more helpful for you guys. I want to address one thing right from the get-go, and that is Intel. Intel has launched Coffee Lake just recently. It's LGA 1151, but it uses newer chipsets. Z370 is the chipset that's available on motherboards right now for it. However, those motherboards tend to be a little bit more expensive. There are some budget options in there, but the reason I'm not choosing any Coffee Lake S CPUs or motherboards for these next couple builds that I'm going to show you guys is because of this. Here's the 8400, which is a 6-core, 6-thread CPU, and fairly reasonably priced at $199. Just not there. It's not in stock. You can't buy it, so why you can't recommend a CPU you can't buy. The 8600K forces you to pay just the low price of $100 extra for the privilege of having your 6-core CPU unlocked so you can overclock it, which I think is pretty absurd. So I don't recommend that right now. $300 is just a crazy market for that. Finally, you have the 8700K still selling for $40 to $50 more than what Intel sold us the MSRP was, and doesn't matter anyway because it's still out of stock. So for that reason, my next two builds are going to be AMD based. AMD based because there's very viable entry-level quad-core options for them. There's very viable upgrade path on AM4 going from quad-core with 4 threads all the way up to 8 cores and 16 threads. And AMD has promised that AM4 will be a mainstream platform socket for the next couple years at least. We're looking at lifespan through 2020. So there's a fairly reasonable expectation that come the next year or so, as AMD is working on Zen 2 stuff, which is still in the rumor phase right now, you might get a CPU in the future that could drop into this. So, all that said, here is the $650 budget gaming PC. We got the quad core, we got a B350 motherboard for $85. We got 8 gigs of memory, an SSD, a GTX 1060 3 gig, and then a reasonably priced case and power supply. Now, I made a quick pie chart because pie charts are so fun, just listing the various components here, the 7 main components: CPU, motherboard, memory, storage, video card case, and power supply, the price of each one with the $650 build, and then the price of each one with the $1,150 build, so you can look relative to the other parts in the system how much is being spent on each component. The video card in both systems is going to be the most expensive part at about $190. That's about 29% of the cost of the $650 build. CPU and cooler is next at $100, 15.2% of the cost. And then beyond that, you're going to have memory, of course, since memory is still pretty expensive, 16.7% of the cost at $110. After that, you have motherboard with $85, 12.9%. Storage with $79, 12%, and then power supply and case both coming in at about 7 to 7.5% at $45 and $50 each. The system went to sleep over here, so it got a little bit quieter. All right, looking at the $1,150 build breakdown here, we can see the video card becomes a larger chunk at $400, 33.7%. CPU and cooler, $195, 16.4%. Memory, 14.3%. Storage, 11.8%. Motherboard, 11.0. So again, just sort of keep in mind these general comparisons when it comes to how much percentage of the total cost of your system you might be spending on each part. Bear in mind it can fluctuate a bit when you're looking at different price points, and especially if you're looking at kind of the bare entry level $650 versus something a bit more full featured at $1150. And I will go down the comparisons between these two builds as I get to the next one. So our CPU for the 650 build is the Ryzen 3 1200, and quad core is now budget, guys. Keep that in your heads now. Quad core is budget. Quad core with hyper-threading is clawing its way up out of budget. 6 core is more mainstream. But a quad core will fully get you by, and it's really nice that you can get a decent quad core from AMD on their current gen platform for $100. And you got to pair that with a motherboard, of course. I've chosen the Gigabyte AB350 Gaming 3. And also, as I'm also showing you guys here, a big way to get a little bit of extra bang for your buck in general, and of course in the holiday season as well, is mail-in rebates. I generally don't include those in the overall cost of the system, but this motherboard at $85 also has a $15 mail-in rebate from Newegg, which means that you can get it for as cheap as $70 if you count mail-in rebates, of course. The things I'm looking for in a B350 motherboard are going to be 4 DIMM slots, so you have plenty of space for memory. I'd like to see some kind of cooling going on the power delivery, and I mean, you can take a closer look at those power delivery phases yourself, maybe in a review on the specific motherboard. I'm not going to go into that now, but good to have if you're planning on doing a bit of overclocking. And then, of course, you want at least a few full-size PCI Express slots, so you can have some expansion options down there. And then beyond that, you have at least one M.2 slot, and this Gigabyte board, they've positioned it right below the graphics card slot, which isn't the best position, but at least it is there for expansion. Beyond that, you're usually going to have roughly the same configuration otherwise when it comes to SATA connectivity, as well as I/O on the back. For memory, my main goal is that it's just compatible. It just works and is compatible. So the Corsair Vengeance LPX kit, the 3000 speed, is very compatible with AMD. This kit has worked in every single AMD test bed I've plugged it into. You can run it at the 2933 divider easily, just by setting the XMP settings, and it is 10 or 20 bucks more than other comparable 8 gig 2x4 gig kits right now, but paying a little bit more for the peace of mind and compatibility is worth it. When it comes to storage, you're going to want an SSD. That's just, I don't recommend getting a cheapo hard drive to install into. You're putting your operating system on this Windows, probably Windows 10. Reformatting it in the future is just kind of a pain in the butt. So for entry level, 240 gig, 250 gig is the SSD that you're going to want to go for. Those will cost you about $79 to $80 right now, sorting by price in this capacity range. They do start to ramp up pretty quickly, but generally speaking, a standard SATA SSD, all of the new ones are relatively comparable to each other. So double check a review, of course, this SanDisk SSD Plus version, as well as the SK Hynix that are both down here in the $80 range, are both totally fine for you. And then next, of course, you want that graphics card. In this parametric filter, I have actually included both 3 gig and 6 gig graphics cards. So sorted by price, you can get a GTX 1063 gig for $190, which is, you know, right about where it should be. And then if you do want to jump up to 6 gig, the cheapest is $260. So that is a good $70 increase, but you will get some benefit from the 6 gig. So if you're wanting to invest a little bit more money on this build, I would say upgrading the graphics card would be a good place to start. There's the GTX 1060 that I have chosen. It's the small one, but it is, of course, reasonably priced. Finally, for case and power supply, you should be able to get a very solid, decently appointed case, such as the Cooler Master MasterBox 5. It's got a clear side panel window so you can look in at your build. It's got a painted black interior. It's a solidly built case with good construction, good cable management, routing options. You know, there are some benefits and features that you don't get with a $50 case, but this is what you should be looking for. This is totally going to get you by. I've worked with this case and it's totally fine. And again, a $10 mail-in rebate will get it for 40 bucks, which is pretty nice. Finally, power supply, 80 plus bronze is what you'd want, and 550 watts. You can get away with 500. I like getting a little bit more headroom on my power supply, but you should be able to get something like this from a reputable manufacturer like Corsair or EVGA for about $40 to $45. And again, man, those mail-in rebates right now, $20 mail-in rebates. So Newegg, you can get this as cheap as 25 bucks right now. And that's the rundown of my $650 budget gaming PC. So just to reiterate, what I'm going for here is the basic quad core from the AMD Ryzen platform. I'm going for a B350 motherboard with those specs I was looking for. I'm going for an 8 gig 2x4 gig kit that I know is compatible with Ryzen with a speed of 3000 or better. I'm going for a 240 or 250 gig SSD, a GTX 1063 gig for as cheap as possible, a $50 case with good appointments and features, and take your pick of which one you think looks best, and then a solid 80 plus bronze rated 550 watt power supply. $658.72 if you get these from all the least expensive places. And then again, as I showed you guys, lots of mail-in rebates going on right now, so take advantage of those if you want to. Jumping back to my comparison here, and I want to point out the differences in price. So going from $100 to $200 on the 1150 build, we're jumping from a quad core with 4 threads to a 6-core 12 thread. So we're tripling our number of threads available for a little less than double the price, and I'd say that's a nice jump up. For the motherboard, we're going full-size ATX, and I've gone with the X370 chipset. You can still get away with a B350 chipset motherboard for this build, and you can save a little bit of money that way. The X370 chipsets motherboards though tend to be built a little bit better with a little bit better power delivery, so potentially better overclocking and maybe some better features. More on that in just a second. For memory, I've jumped from 2x4 gigs to 2x8 gigs, and it's not quite double in price, about $60 more, so you're getting more gigs per dollar if you can afford to go with the 2x8 gig kit. For storage, I'm going from 240 to 480. Double the storage, less than double the price. For the video card, we're going from a 1063 gig all the way up to a GTX 1070 full fat 8 gig. And that is a very nice upgrade in GPU performance. Case, we're just increasing the price by about $30 for a nicer case with some better features, and the power supply, again, just jumping up by about $25-ish to get ourselves an 80 plus gold rated unit. So here is what those price increases have gotten us, and total price listed here with all of the cheapest prices from PC Part Pickers, $1,183.28. Again, big jump in CPU core processing performance, going up to that 6-core, and AMD is nice enough to give you simultaneous multi-threading on their 6-core Ryzen 5 processors, so you get 6 cores and 12 threads for the low price of just under $200. Overclockable, comes with a very decent CPU cooler in the box, so I really like that for value, the Ryzen 5 1600. For motherboard, we have the X370 Gaming X. This is another ASRock motherboard, and I chose this one mainly because it's got a pretty decent sale going on for about $130 from SuperBiz. You can also get it for about that same price from Newegg, but that's using a mail-in rebates. And this motherboard got some very positive reviews. You can see from the reviews here on Newegg. It's got some a pretty decently upgraded power delivery configuration. It's a 12-phase power delivery set. Granted, the phases aren't everything, but this is definitely built a lot better than a lot of those B350 boards I was looking for. Beyond that, looking for the same specs. 4 DIMM slots, of course. Nice to have a little bit of RGB lighting. Not, of course, a key selling point, but hey, it's there. And then here, since we are upgrading the board and spending a bit more money, we've got some other features such as a couple RGB headers on there, but more functionally speaking, 2 M.2 slots on this board, one down here and one up here. Also, X370 will allow you to do 2-way GPU configurations. That's again, not very practical, but it is there now. For the memory, again, just doubled the capacity, so went from a 2x8 gig or 2x4 gig kit to 2x8 gigs. So you can again get by with 2x4 gigs with this same build. So the idea with me going with the 650 build and the 1150 build, if I didn't make this clear enough, was take anything from the 650 build and kind of swap in stuff from the more expensive build, and you can kind of get yourself into the middle there with whatever parts you might think are more important to you than others. But I did the sort by price here with the parametric filter again for Corsair kits that are DDR3000, 3200, and you can save 15 or 20 bucks by going with the blue kit, and maybe just paint it or something like that. It's the same memory inside, it's just blue. Anyway, figure that out whether or not you care about aesthetics or not. Again, the same parametric filter here for the SSD, just I'm looking for 300 to 600 gig range rather than down in the 250 gig range. And here we can see the prices are much more reasonable with SSDs this capacity. When you're comparing it to spending, say, 90 bucks on a 240 gig, it's not that much to upgrade to this. If you sort by price per gigabyte right over here, you can actually see where you get the best deals. So the Western Digital 500 gig SSD is a great deal right now for 140 bucks. Maybe consider that one. And then of course, video card, we wanted a GTX 1070. We want the cheapest GTX 1070. You got a Zotac and a Gigabyte, both mini versions available down here. And then maybe consider some of these other options if you want to spend a little bit more money, if you want a beefier cooler or something like that. But don't spend too much more. Even the mini versions, you can still overclock, and there's not really a whole lot of variance between the max speed you can get. Case, of course, we gotta have a case and power supply. I think $80 is a good budget for a case in this range, and for 80 bucks, I think the Phanteks P400 is a fine option. Again, you got some RGB lighting options that are in there. Solid build, you got tempered glass, USB 3.0, so a lot of those kind of blingy nice features. And a case I've worked with and is super easy to build in. A good case by Phanteks. There's other $80 case options there too. As long as they're full-size ATX, then choose whatever one you think looks prettiest. Finally, we are paying another $20-ish for a more premium power supply. 80 plus gold rated rather than bronze means we'll have a little bit cheaper power bill with this power supply, and 650 watt gives us a little bit more headroom for upgrade options in the future, whether you're talking about adding drives or adding, I guess mainly adding drives, or upgrading to possibly a more power-hungry graphics card. And those are my builds for November 2017. I hope you guys have learned a little bit about choosing the parts for your system, because I know it can be a challenging process, especially now that there's mainstream and enthusiasts on the Intel and AMD sides. There's just so many choices around right now. But guys, if any of you use this as a template to build yourselves a new PC this holiday season, I would love to hear about that in the comment section down below. I don't have a feedback straw poll for this month, because I think what I'm gonna do for next month, towards the beginning of December, is kind of do the same MO that I did right now. Give you guys sort of general guidelines for parting out a system, but we'll do it after Black Friday rather than before. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hit the thumbs up button if you did enjoy it, and we'll see you guys next time.